hum of the engines had quieted, replaced by the faint rustling of passengers settling into their seats, their conversations muted as the announcement of the unexpected delay sank in. Maya closed her notebook again, resting her hands on the leather cover. Her calm demeanor remained intact, though the sharpness in her eyes hinted at the mental chess game she was already winning. She glanced out the window, the glow of the terminal lights reflecting faintly on the glass. This pause, she knew, wasn't just a coincidence. Mr. Thompson worked quickly, and if he was already pulling strings, things were about to unfold in ways no one here expected. Meanwhile, in the galley, Deborah and Gary huddled in hushed tones, their earlier tension now replaced with outright fear. "I don't like this," Deborah muttered. Her arms crossed tightly across her chest. She had spent years climbing the ranks of the airline, her reputation carefully cultivated through hard work and diplomacy. But now, she could feel that foundation crumbling beneath her. That delay? It's corporate. Someone called it in. Gary leaned back against the counter, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by a restless energy that made him look smaller somehow. "So what if they did?" he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's not like we did anything wrong. We asked her to move politely and she refused. End of story." Deborah shook her head. "You're missing the point. This isn't about what we think we did. It's about perception, and if she's connected to someone high enough to trigger a delay like this, that perception could destroy us." Gary scoffed, but his shifting eyes betrayed his unease. "She's just another passenger who's good at bluffing. Probably knows someone in customer service and thought she'd scare us. I'm telling you it's nothing." But even as he spoke, Gary felt the weight of Deborah's words settling in his chest like a stone. He had seen passengers threaten to escalate issues before, but none had the quiet certainty Maya displayed. It wasn't a bluff. It was a warning. Back in the first-class cabin, Mrs. Sterling sat rigidly in her seat, her fingers tapping against the armrest in an impatient rhythm. The delay had done little to calm her temper. If anything, it had fanned the flames. She couldn't shake the image of Maya's composed face, the way she had dismissed Mrs. Sterling's demands as though she were insignificant. "She thinks she's better than me," Mrs. Sterling muttered under her breath, her lips curling into a sneer. Beside her, her companion Linda shifted uncomfortably, her earlier confidence in Mrs. Sterling's cause now replaced with unease. "Maybe we should just let it go," Linda whispered, her eyes darting toward the aisle where Deborah and Gary were still talking. "This is getting messy." Mrs. Sterling shot her a withering look. "Let it go? Do you know how much money I've spent with this airline? How many hours I've logged in first class? I'm not letting some nobody make a fool of me." Linda winced, but said nothing, turning her attention to the in-flight magazine in her lap. Mrs. Sterling, however, wasn't done. She leaned forward, craning her neck to catch a glimpse of Maya, who sat serenely in her seat, her focus once again on her notebook. "Unbelievable," Mrs. Sterling hissed. "She just sits there, acting like she owns the place." A flight attendant passed by, and Mrs. Sterling flagged him down with a sharp wave of her hand. "When are we taking off?" she demanded, her voice cutting through the quiet cabin. "This delay is unacceptable." The young man hesitated, clearly caught off guard. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the captain hasn't provided an update yet. We'll be underway shortly." Mrs. Sterling waved him off with a dismissive gesture, muttering under her breath as he retreated down the aisle. Maya didn't so much as glance in her direction, but Mrs. Sterling's anger simmered hotter with every passing second. 15 minutes later, the stillness of the cabin was broken by the soft hiss of the cabin door opening. Two sharply dressed men in suits stepped inside, their presence immediately drawing attention. One carried a sleek briefcase, while the other held a tablet in one hand, his expression unreadable. Maya's gaze flicked toward them, her lips curving into the faintest hint of a smile. Mr. Thompson never disappointed. The taller of the two men scanned the cabin briefly before his eyes landed on Deborah, who had stepped forward instinctively at their arrival. "Ms. Lane?" he asked, his voice low but commanding. Deborah nodded, her throat dry. "Yes." "I'm Deborah Lane, the flight supervisor. Can I help you?" "We're with corporate," the man said, holding up an ID badge. "We need to speak with you and the rest of your team immediately." Gary, who had been lingering nearby, froze mid-step. His face paled as he exchanged a glance with Deborah, who looked equally unsettled. "Is there a problem?" Deborah asked, though she already knew the answer. The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he gestured toward the galley. "We'll speak privately now." Deborah and Gary exchanged another look before following the men into the galley, their movement stiff and uncertain. As the door to the cabin closed behind them, a ripple of murmurs spread through the passengers. Even Mrs. Sterling sat straighter, craning her neck to see what was happening. Maya, meanwhile, remained perfectly still, her hands resting lightly on her notebook. She didn't need to see what was happening in the galley. She already knew how this story would end. The gears were in motion, and there was no stopping them now. Inside the galley, the air was thick with tension. The two corporate representatives stood with practiced composure, their eyes sharp and assessing as they addressed Deborah and Gary. "We've reviewed the situation," the taller man began, his voice even but cold. "And we've spoken with key stakeholders regarding this flight. Effective immediately, both of you are being removed from duty." Deborah's eyes widened in shock. "Removed? But—" "There's no room for negotiation," the man cut in, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Your conduct has been deemed unprofessional and inconsistent with the airline's policies. Further disciplinary action will be determined following a full investigation." Gary's mouth opened and closed, his usual arrogance replaced by sheer panic. "You can't. Seriously?" he sputtered. This is a misunderstanding. We didn't do anything wrong." The second man, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "We've reviewed passenger testimony and corporate records," he said firmly. "Your actions jeopardize the integrity of this flight and the airline's reputation. This decision is final." Deborah felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Her years of service, her carefully built career, gone in an instant. Gary, meanwhile, had gone pale, his hands trembling as he tried to form a coherent response. "You're to leave the aircraft immediately," the first man said, gesturing toward the cabin door. "Security is waiting outside to escort you." As the two stunned crew members were led out of the galley, Maya turned her head slightly, watching them from the corner of her eye. The faintest trace of satisfaction flickered across her face, but she quickly masked it, returning her attention to her notebook. The sound of Mrs. Sterling's indignant voice rose once again, but this time it barely registered. Maya had already won the battle, and she knew the war was over too. The power of a single, well-placed phone call, born of quiet determination, had shifted the entire dynamic, leading to an unexpected and swift reckoning for those who had underestimated the quiet strength in Seat 1A. The cabin door closed behind Deborah and Gary, the sound a sharp punctuation to the tension that had gripped the plane for the first time since the commotion began. A hush fell over the first-class cabin. Passengers exchanged glances, whispering among themselves, though no one dared to speak loudly enough to be overheard. Maya remained seated, her posture relaxed. As if nothing out of the ordinary had happened, she knew better than to revel in the moment. It wasn't in her nature to gloat. Instead, she focused on what mattered most, the larger message this incident would send. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. The two corporate representatives emerged from the galley and made their way down the aisle. One of them stopped at Maya's seat, inclining his head respectfully. "Dr. Holloway," he said softly, "everything has been resolved. Please accept our deepest apologies for the inconvenience and the way you were treated. The individuals involved are no longer part of this flight." Maya met his gaze evenly, her expression unreadable. "I appreciate the swift action," she said. her voice calm but carrying an edge that made the man straighten slightly. "However, I trust this won't end here. I expect a full review of the airline's policies and training procedures. This isn't the first time I've seen something like this, and I doubt it will be the last." "Of course, ma'am," the man replied quickly. "We'll ensure that happens. You have my word." Maya nodded once, her attention shifting back to her notebook as if dismissing him. The man hesitated for a moment before retreating down the aisle, leaving her to her thoughts. She didn't need their promises. She had the influence to ensure they followed through, and she intended to use it. Across the cabin, Mrs. Sterling was seething. Her face was flushed, her fingers clutching the armrest so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The smug satisfaction she had displayed earlier was gone, replaced by a simmering rage that seemed to radiate off her in waves. "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Sterling hissed under her breath. "Absolutely ridiculous." Linda, seated beside her, leaned in cautiously. "Maybe it's best if we just let it go," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's not worth causing more trouble." Mrs. Sterling turned on her sharply, her eyes blazing. "Let it go? Do you realize what just happened? They threw me under the bus. Me. I'm a Platinum Elite member. Do you have any idea how much I spend on this airline every year? And they're treating me like her." She spat the last word as though it were venomous, jerking her chin toward Maya's seat. Linda recoiled slightly, her gaze darting toward Maya, who remained utterly unbothered. If Maya had heard Mrs. Sterling's outburst, she gave no indication of it. Her calm demeanor only seemed to fuel Mrs. Sterling's anger further. "It isn't over," Mrs. Sterling muttered, her tone dark. "I'll make sure corporate hears about this. I have connections." Linda sighed, her unease growing. Mrs. Sterling's refusal to back down was beginning to feel less like determination and more like desperation. She didn't dare voice her thoughts, though, not with Mrs. Sterling in this state. The intercom crackled to life once more, and the captain's voice filled the cabin, steady and composed. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay. As a reminder, safety and customer satisfaction are our top priorities. We'll be resuming our departure shortly. Thank you for your patience." The announcement seemed routine, but Maya noticed the subtle shift in tone, a hint of finality, that signaled the flight crew had been instructed to ensure there were no further disruptions. The cabin doors remained closed now, and the faint tension in the air began to dissipate as passengers settled back into their routines. But for Mrs. Sterling, the captain's words were the final straw. She stood abruptly, her sudden movement drawing the attention of those around her. Her voice cut through the relative quiet, loud and indignant. "This is unacceptable," she declared, glaring down the aisle as if the corporate representatives might magically reappear. "I've been a loyal customer of this airline for years, and this is how I'm treated? I demand to speak to someone in charge now." Several heads turned, passengers exchanging uneasy glances. Even Linda looked embarrassed, sinking lower in her seat as if she could disappear entirely. Before anyone could respond, one of the corporate representatives returned, his expression unreadable. He approached Mrs. Sterling with deliberate calm, his voice low but firm. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, "we've been informed that your behavior has disrupted the cabin environment. Unfortunately, we must ask you to disembark the plane." The words hung in the air, heavy with finality. Mrs. Sterling's eyes widened in disbelief. You can't be serious," she sputtered. "You're removing me? For what? For standing up for myself?" The man remained unmoved. "Our priority is ensuring a safe and comfortable experience for all passengers. Your conduct has made that difficult. Security is waiting outside to escort you from the plane." Mrs. Sterling's face turned a deep shade of red, her anger boiling over. "This is outrageous! Do you have any idea who I am?" The man didn't flinch. "Your status as a Platinum Elite member has been noted. However, It does not exempt you from following airline policies or respecting other passengers. For a moment, Mrs. Sterling looked as though she might argue further, but the murmur spreading through the cabin made her hesitate. She glanced around, realizing for the first time that she had lost whatever sympathy she might have had. The other passengers' expressions ranged from disinterest to thinly veiled satisfaction. No one was on her side. Maya didn't even look up from her notebook as Mrs. Sterling was escorted down the aisle, her protest growing fainter with each step. The door to the cabin opened briefly, the sound of security guards speaking in low tones filtering in, before it closed again, leaving behind only silence. The plane finally began its taxi to the runway, the hum of the engines returning as the tension dissipated entirely. Maya glanced out the window, the distant lights of the terminal shrinking as they moved forward. She allowed herself a small smile, calm, satisfied, and entirely self-assured. She had said nothing to Mrs. Sterling directly, but her presence alone had been enough. Maya understood that true power didn't require loud declarations or public victories. Sometimes it was the quiet resolve to stand firm and let the system correct itself. As the plane lifted off into the night sky, Maya leaned back in her seat, her mind already shifting to the work ahead. This incident, she knew, was just the beginning. There was much to be done to ensure no one else experienced what she had. But for now, she allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. Karma, she thought, had a way of working itself out. The cabin door closed with a final, resolute hiss as Deborah and Gary were escorted off the plane. The passengers who had been murmuring quietly fell silent once more, their gazes shifting toward the first-class cabin where Maya sat. Maya's calm demeanor remained unchanged, though her presence now carried a weight that no one could ignore. Evelyn, sitting stiffly in her seat, let out a huff of disbelief. "Well," she said loudly, crossing her arms, "I hope they replace them with someone competent. This delay is ridiculous." Maya, who had remained silent throughout Deborah and Gary's removal, finally looked up, her gaze resting on Evelyn with a quiet intent. There was no anger, no malice, only an unyielding strength that seemed to cut through Evelyn's facade. "You still don't get it, do you?" Maya said softly, her voice carrying effortlessly in the tense cabin. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard by the sudden directness. "Excuse me?" "This wasn't just about a seat," Maya continued, her tone calm but firm. "It was about respect, about the way you and others like you think the world should bend to your will, no matter who it hurts. But today you learned that's not how things work." Evelyn opened her mouth to respond, but Maya held up a hand, silencing her. "You assumed I was less than you because I didn't fit the image you expected to see in this seat, and you used your privilege to try to take something that wasn't yours." The other passengers watched in stunned silence as Maya's words hung in the air, cutting through the tension like a blade. Evelyn's face reddened, her composure slipping as she sputtered for a response. I didn't mean," she began, but Maya interrupted her. "You did," Maya said simply, "and now you get to live with the consequences." Before Evelyn could retort, one of the corporate representatives re-entered the cabin, his expression unreadable as he approached Maya's seat. "Dr. Holloway," he said respectfully, "we've taken care of the situation. On behalf of the airline, I'd like to extend our sincerest apologies for the unacceptable treatment you received today." Maya nodded politely but didn't smile. "I trust you'll be conducting a full review of your staff's training and policies?" she asked, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "Absolutely," the man replied. "We'll be implementing new protocols immediately, and as a gesture of goodwill, the airline would like to offer you complimentary first-class travel for the next 2 years." Maya inclined her head, her expression unreadable. "Thank you," she said. "But what I really want is accountability. Not just for me, but for every passenger who's been made to feel less than because of who they are." The man nodded, his respect for her evident. "You have my word." As the corporate representative turned to leave, Evelyn leaned forward, her indignation boiling over. "Wait a minute," she snapped. "What about?" Me? I'm the one who's been inconvenienced here. I'm a Platinum Elite member. Do you know how much money I spent on this airline?" The representative turned to her, his expression cool. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice polite but firm, "your behavior today was documented by multiple witnesses. The airline has decided to revoke your Platinum Elite status, effective immediately." Evelyn's jaw dropped, her face turning pale. You can't do that. I have rights." "You do," the man replied calmly, "and so does every other passenger. Your actions today violated the airline's code of conduct, and we take that very seriously. Security will escort you off the plane now." The cabin erupted into whispers as two uniformed security guards appeared at the door. Evelyn protested loudly, her voice rising in pitch as she demanded to speak to someone in charge, but her words fell on deaf ears as she was led away. Her protests fading into the distance, the plane finally began to taxi down the runway, the delay a distant memory as the passengers settled back into their seats. Maya gazed out the window, the soft glow of the city lights below casting a faint reflection on the glass. The silence around her felt heavier now. Not the awkward quiet of earlier, but a kind of reverent stillness. Though no one said it aloud, the other passengers seemed to recognize that they had witnessed something significant. Dr. Nia Holloway, without raising her voice or resorting to anger, had stood her ground and changed the course of the day. As the plane lifted into the night sky, Maya leaned back in her seat, her notebook resting on her lap. She didn't smile, but there was a quiet satisfaction in her eyes. She had fought this battle not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been made to feel small. Weeks later, the airline released a public statement announcing new diversity and inclusivity training for all staff, along with stricter protocols for handling passenger disputes. The incident on this specific flight was never mentioned by name, but those who knew understood that it had been a turning point. This was more than just a victory. It was a lesson. Respect isn't just a courtesy, it's a requirement. And those who forget it will always inevitably face the consequences. For Dr. Nia Holloway, this wasn't the end of her mission, but another powerful affirmation. Auratech Innovations thrived, her vision becoming a reality impacting countless lives. Her story, while not widely publicized by her, became an internal legend within the airline. A cautionary tale for some, an inspiring beacon for others. It resonated far beyond the confines of that first-class cabin, whispering a powerful truth to all who would listen. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever been told you don't belong, if you've ever had your achievements questioned because of who you are, remember Dr. Nia Holloway. Remember that your presence is your power. Your voice, even when quiet, is your weapon. Your dignity is non-negotiable. This wasn't just a story about a seat. It was a story about claiming your rightful space in a world that too often tries to deny it. It was about proving that true strength isn't about how loud you scream, but how resolutely you stand your ground. And sometimes, the most powerful words are spoken without a sound. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, made you feel, then please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to our channel for more tales that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the incredible human spirit. Your support helps us amplify these crucial stories. Thank you for listening.